Hello, I'm Queen Educator, the CEO and lead consultant of Everybody Educate, a full service consulting firm that exists to empower and equip educators to be at their best. With the state of our world, education consulting is so important. So many teachers are quitting, but guess what? Our primary goal is to support educators and educational establishments in achieving authentic, creative, and culturally relevant teaching and learning. We are sure that your learning environment will shift and you will see excellence and equitable practices when you partner with us. Thank you. See our services below. Welcome everyone. We are so very excited. You guys know I say this every week, but I am saying this week. We have such an amazing guest here with us, and you are in for a treat. We have the one, the only, D. Paul Miller. I want to tell you a little bit about him, but I just want him to come on and say hello right now. Say hello to the people.
Hello. Thank you, Ms. Robin, Queen Educator, for having me on here. This is such a pleasure and just an absolute honor. So thank you for bringing me here and just giving me a little bit of time with you and your audience.
Thank you so much. We really are so excited to have you here. Guys, if we are talking about how we educate, and we want to make sure we're doing it in a brilliant way. And so we have one of the most brilliant people here to do that. And so we want to talk to you a little bit today, and just talk to us about where you're from and what you do, and then we'll go into a little bit more.
All right. Well, I'm from Alabama originally. But now live in the state of Florida, Central Florida, in fact. And it's been an absolute crazy ride for me as an educator. I started off in what would be considered more of an inner city school. And taught there for about 10 years. Absolutely loved it and was enjoying it, but also feeling like I needed another challenge in my life after 10 years of being there. And our school district was actually starting a virtual program, virtual school. And I said, I've got to test the waters. I've got to see what that is about. That sounds really interesting, innovative, and just fascinating. So I was lucky enough to jump in and took over teaching social studies, all subject areas, 6 through 12, including AP level courses online as that initial school was getting started. So I was there the beginning phases of that. And, it was just a new way of teaching, very, very fascinating. And over time, I was realizing there are things that I was doing in the classroom as a successful teacher in the classroom that actually it really wasn't that different in a virtual setting. Those same core elements, foundational elements of good teaching applied in the virtual world, just like it did in the brick and mortar teaching world. And so over those years and getting that experience, helping to build a school, build a program, had a lot of people, my wife, other administrators, other principals that were encouraging me to go ahead and get my administrator's degree, my secondary education administrator's degree. And so I went forward with that and ended up getting my master's in educational leadership while I was a virtual teacher. And it just so happened that our principal of the virtual program at that time was stepping down at the same time I was graduating and stepping up and to be a certified principal here in the state of Florida. And our district, they called me to be the principal of our virtual program here. And so it was a great honor. And I love stepping into that role. That was about 2017. And obviously in 2020, some things changed. And you know what I'm talking about, Robin, and every other educator out there knows what I'm talking about. What happened in 2020 with COVID absolutely changed all schools, changed what all teachers are looking at, what they're doing. But really for me as a virtual school principal, things really changed for me at that time. We went from a school of really what amounted to, less than 500 students to a school of bringing in over 10,000 students. Now, obviously, we brought in 10,000 students, and then we transitioned those students. Some of them said, you know what, our schools here in Florida actually did reopen. And at that point, we lost some students, but we started that year with about 7,500 students. And we had to bring on 200 teachers for me to train and get ready to teach virtually across the board for the whole year and figure out what the heck we're going to do. And so it was very successful. We did a great job in terms of training the teachers, getting them prepared. But after close to a year of doing this process, I found myself, I would say maybe burned out, be the right word. I felt overwhelmed. I felt the strangest feeling. I said, in my brain, I felt like I should be at the top of my game. I should be feeling better than I've ever felt as an educator because I'm doing this. I've got a school with 7,500 students and we're finding success. And yet I was more burned out, more overwhelmed, more discouraged than ever. And I said, what is happening? I had to step back for a little bit and really take some, do some audits in my life and figure out what was going on. And I realized that I'd become so overburdened and overtaxed with processes, with operations, with just, making sure that conveyor belt, if you will, was continuing to move forward, whether it's working with the students or a teacher, whatever. It was just a process. It had become so cold in that process that I was so far removed from my why in education. And then my why in education was working directly with the students, working directly with teachers, and improving their lives, no matter where they came from, no matter their background. My job was to improve their life. And I realized I'd become so far separated from that in the midst of COVID, in the midst of figuring out all these operations. And I said, wow, I stepped back and I started to look at all of the teachers I'd worked with. I stepped back and started looking at the teachers in our own district, and even after post-COVID now, looking at the amount of turnover we had. And of course, you mentioned it already in previous episodes and different things that you put out there, just talking about the teacher turnover issue and the teachers quitting. And I realized that it wasn't just me. It wasn't just the principal of a virtual school that was feeling overwhelmed, burned out, overtaxed, overburdened with everything that seemed to be falling on top of us as educators. And I said, one of the changes I made very quickly was to get back in touch with my students, my parents, my teachers, and not just say, hey, this is what you need to do to be successful. Hey, this is what you need to be completing this much work each week or things like that. It became much more about the relationship and what I was doing to establish myself as a leader, but more importantly, as a servant leader focused on building relationships with my students, with my parents, with my stakeholders, with my teachers, everyone across the board. And I realized that if I didn't have a focus on that first one, I wouldn't find the level of success I wanted to find. But more importantly, I wouldn't be fulfilled as an educator. And so I stepped back and actually put things together and started saying, okay, what do I need to do? And in that process of what I need to do, I actually developed what I call the lead, serve, teach philosophy. Wrote a book about it.
Yes, you did, guys. I'm going to put it right on down here. You are the prince. I love this. First of all, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No,
you
you're
have
fine.
such a beautiful history and story, and then just like mission forward. And I want you all to know that there is hope. There is, like, I love your name, America, like your tagline, America's
Mhm.
principle of possibility. It is possible. I love that. And I love that you shared around, your own personal struggle around, like, you were burnt out. We're
Mhm.
thinking about teachers
Absolutely.
being burnt out and like you had so much that you were trying to manage and handle. And I love in your response that you had sent me earlier, you said, and you can say more about this, how you were an unconscious, like, what does that say? Oh, I was an unconscious competent. I was an unconscious competent in the classroom of an inner city school many years ago. You know,
Right.
you just did what worked. uh,
Right.
can you go into that a little bit more? I feel like we can learn and glean from you there.
Absolutely. And that was that transition again, even stepping into the virtual world and saying,
Yeah,
oh, yeah, I'm just going to take what I knew worked in the brick and mortar world and put it into play here. And I found great success.
yeah.
I called myself the unconscious competent.
Say more
I
about
was,
that. Yes, I love that.
there was, well, there's unconscious competence, I think, in every industry. It's those people that just, they don't know why, they don't know how, they just pick what works and they say, I'm just going to do this right here. They can't explain it. They could maybe try to teach it to someone else, but they're not quite sure. They can't put their finger on, well, the words maybe that would explain it in a understandable manner. They're just good at what they do, and they just pick what works and they go with it. I was at an inner city school. We were actually, when I started teaching, the school was in what Florida considered a corrective status.
Mm.
The school had been performing so low for so many years in a row that they were actually under the microscope, if you will, of the State Department of Education, and had all these state officials, district officials, everybody under the sun coming into the school, working with the teachers, trying to develop them and develop strategies and techniques. And it was like, sometimes it felt like drinking from a fire hydrant with how much they were how much they were pouring on us. The important thing was, again, looking back on it now, I realized all of the techniques and strategies that they were bringing in were great. They had all the data to back it up as to why these strategies were great, why these techniques would work with our specific students, and how we could raise this school up from being a low performing school to a high performing school. All of the best techniques in the world. But I realized that each day I went into my classroom teaching juniors, teaching seniors, and they were looking at me saying, "We don't know this guy. We don't know whether we can believe this guy." And I could take all the best techniques in the world for teaching and throw them at the students, and it really wouldn't move the needle because there was no relationship there. I had not established myself as a leader. I had not established myself, maybe more importantly, as someone who would serve the best interest of those students. And that would form the foundation of the relationship. So one day, on an off chance, I ended up, and I can't even remember exactly why I was inspired to tell a story from my past. But I just stopped what I was doing right at the beginning of class. I said, yeah, I want to share a story with you all. And it was a story about myself when I was in high school, when I had made some pretty egregious mistakes. And I just told them the story. I was real with them. And I let them see me as a fallible human being, somebody that can make mistakes. And in fact, had made some really bad mistakes in high school. And it immediately changed the feel of the room. Some students opened up. They started sharing with me a little bit. We all laughed. We had a good time. And then I went into teaching for that day. I was taking out one of those great teaching techniques. I'd been told, hey, you need to do this in the classroom to get your students to learn. So I pulled out that reading technique, and here we are. We're reading a portion of the Declaration of Independence in this U.S. history class, and all of a sudden I look around and I'm like, I've got like 30 some odd students in here that are all in. They're engaged. No one's heads down. And I'm like, what did I change today? What did I do different? Again, that unconscious confidence. I'm just simply looking at anything. I'm grasping at straws saying, all right, what's going to work? And I said, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to come in and tell them another story. And it only takes a few just to tell this little story. And over time, it built up to where every day I started class with what I called Life Lesson with Mr. Miller. And it was just a story from my past, or sometimes I pick stories from other people's past. I just tell these stories. And the funny thing was that it took the classroom out of that academic setting for just a moment. It allowed the students to see me as a real fallible person, but also somebody that had been there, done that, somebody that they could learn from about life. And that had so much value for those students. And when they could learn something about life from me as an educator, again, I didn't realize what was happening. I didn't realize that I was actually building this relationship with them. I was unconscious about it. I just said, this works. So I want to be able to teach them about the Declaration of Independence. So I'm going to be sure to do this little story that gets their attention. In my mind, all I thought was that this is just getting their attention and getting them set to learn. I didn't realize the impact it was having in building the relationship, that foundational element, and that it would carry on and produce. I could pull any of those techniques into my classroom at that point that the state officials were giving. I could take any of it and say, yeah, it's going to work. I could guarantee it was going to work. And over time, I realized, this life lesson, this beginning part of my class, the extra 5 or 10 minutes that I take out of my day to build relationship with the students was the most important thing I could ever do. It established me as a leader because they said, this guy has something of value that he's going to share. It was about life in that first 5 or 10 minutes. And then it was about my content area, whether it was government, economics, U.S. history, whatever I may have been teaching in the AP courses after that. It taking the time to establish that relationship allowed me to show them that there's so much value in the education, the academic side of things that I was teaching as well. It opened the door, as I say in my book, Hey, Teachers Don't Quit. This is how you open the door to teaching and learning. I do feel like our world of education has done so much and moved forward so quickly, and there's so many names now that we all know, Mike Matos and Doug Fisher and, all these fantastic educators, and they're so extraordinarily smart, and they've done so much research. They've been able to quantify learning, which for many years in education, it was hard. I say you can't quantify learning. Well, they've quantified learning, and it's pretty cool. As educators, we sit back, man, wow, yeah, this technique here works a whole lot better than this technique over here. I'm going to do the one that works. But we've also come about with new terms like bell-to-bell instruction.
Exactly.
Like if you're not teaching something academic right from the start, right as soon as the bell rings, all the way till the bell rings again, then you're losing time. You're not moving the needle with the students' learning and achievement. And so I think I always compare it to a pendulum. It's like the art of teaching on one side and the science of teaching on the other. And I feel like the ball in the middle has swung a little bit too far. That pendulum has swung too far maybe to that science side. But the key is the science side is not bad. It's great. It's wonderful. We've got to use it.
Absolutely.
We also have to bring that pendulum back into the middle. It can't be too far over here to the art side, because then we're not looking at what actually works. We're just doing whatever we want to do and too focused on the relationship we might do.
Yeah.
How to find that balance and bring it back into the middle. So that's the idea of the lead, serve, teach philosophy. It's how to get that pendulum back into the middle.
Well, I'm going to put this back up here because you guys, I love how you put that out there. And I'm going to ask you a couple of things. Number one, you mentioned Doug Fisher. You mentioned some resources and things. And our title for our show today is, Hey, Teachers Don't Quit. And we want to help you to see. So I'm going to actually put your stuff back up here. We want to make sure that you guys are ready to have a brilliant school year. And in order to do that, principal of possibility today, honey. He has already given you some amazing tools, and I really want to like highlight them because I know a lot of people are already getting ready to go back to school right now. Some of you might already be there, and if you're just tuning in, say hello to my guests, please. We have the one and only principal, Hey Teachers Don't Quit, D. Paul Miller, principal of Possibility. And I need you all to show him some love. He is so ready to support and help you as you are going back to in the new school year. And, you know, being on this platform, we believe that everybody is educating somebody somewhere. We want to make sure that we're doing it with excellence and equitable practices. And so you've just given us some excellent things to share, to go off of. And we talked a little bit about your journey here today, but I want you to let us know what are like some techniques and strategies or some resources teachers can use. I know Doug Fisher is one huge resource that schools use as well. But when you were talking about going in the middle and the balance of that pendulum, what are some things that practical things people can do to get started?
Well, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked it. It is. I'd say a pet peeve. That makes it sound negative, but there is a pet peeve of mine that happens so often in the world of education. And again, it's that science versus art of teaching. And on that science side, they come in and say, "Yep, don't forget your why." And it's almost become cliche to remember your why as educators. It's become cliche, and a lot of times they say, you know, don't forget about that relationship with the student. So important. But then they jump right over to, hey, this is the best technique, or this is the best strategy, and here's the data. And they we're inundated with data about why things should be done or shouldn't be done. And so that's all, again, good, fine, and well. We need that data. We need that science of teaching. We need the best techniques and skills. But, you know, the interesting part is when you look at when these individuals or these corporations come along and they say, hey, here's all the data and the science behind it. Here's the tangible action steps to take to implement this strategy in your classroom. And they literally will list it out. Step 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's beautiful. And it makes it attainable, makes it accessible, even for the rookie teacher that's sitting there saying, I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah. And the veteran teacher that's skeptical of everything saying, I don't know if that's going to work or not. Well, here's some really easy strategies, 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's just go do it. And so that's why the science of teaching world labels it and sets it out that way. So what I decided to do in the book, Hey Teachers Don't Quit, is I went through and said, you know, I would just be another resounding gong, just out there saying, hey, remember your why, and it's important for relationships and serve your students. Remember, and I said, no, I don't want to just be that guy, you know, after saying the cliche things that everybody already knows are important. No, I wanted to step back from that and say, how can I give tangible action steps for teachers to really renew their purpose and also kind of claim their role as a leader, as a servant, then as a teacher. You know, part of the theory of the lead, serve, teach philosophy is that so often, even in college training programs, our professional development programs in the world of education, it jumps straight to that third element, if you will, the third leg of the stool, as I call it, which is teaching. You know, we jump straight to all the data, we jump straight to the techniques. We don't spend very much time working with our teachers on leadership and the most effective form of leadership, which is servant leadership. We don't spend a whole lot of time teaching, training, and giving tangible practices, step 1, 2, 3, on how to establish yourself as a leader, or step 1, 2, 3, how to prove to your students beyond a reasonable doubt that you will serve their best interest. And so what I do in my book called Hey Teachers Don't Quit is I actually take three specific items about establishing yourself as a leader, how to do that. And I give specific action steps, or what I call a call to action. Hey, go and do this right here. And it's a very clear, very tangible action step that they can take to start working on their abilities as a leader. And some of them are directly impacting students. Some of the calls to action are directly impacting themselves as a leader, as a professional. And then the second, obviously, the second leg to the stool is about being a servant. And how to establish yourself as a servant. So I give, again, 3 specific calls to action where they can go and apply tangible action steps that I give them to establish themselves as a servant and to actually be re-energized through this process. So often people see serving as an outflow of energy, and part of my philosophy is that actually no. Serving is the very thing that re-energizes you, brings energy back into your body, into your soul, into your mind. And then in the last phase of my book, I take each one of a leadership principle, combine it with a service principle, and then give them a teaching principle that is a result of combining the teaching serving elements. And so there's 3 specific, again, calls to action for teaching, now based upon their foundation that they built as a leader and as a servant. Of course, the unconscious side of it, you might even say, is that as you develop yourself as a leader and a servant, it's actually happening through relationship building with your students. And so it's a beautiful combination that opens that door for teaching. Robin, if we have time, I can go into a little bit deeper elements and actually go over a couple of those chapters if you wanted to, or principles. But I want to pass it back over to you and see how much time.
I love it. I love it. Let's go deeper. I love it. I definitely have time. And here's the thing. I was trying to put my your book up there because I want you all to see it, but my end keeps getting cut off for Amazon. I don't know why. But there it goes.
It goes right there. I've got my book right here.
It's deeper. But before you go deeper into it, I just want to reiterate, because you are just an expert in this field, and I want to highlight that. And there are people listening today, and I want you all to take a minute to put your comments in the chat, your questions in the chat. So even as our Principal Miller goes deeper, what questions do you have? What comments do you have? What do you need? What are some things that you need to understand when leading, serving, and teaching using that philosophy? And I love what you talked about around leading and servant leadership. It's a game changer. It's a game changer. And so giving those steps but not necessarily steps where this is what you do. This is why you're on this show, because I think we need to think for ourselves, but we need to have guidance, but we do need to have levels of that guidance. And I believe, like, after reading through your book and reading your book, that you do provide that guidance. So let's go deeper there.
Yeah, I love it. So in the first phase of my book, the first leg of my stool, so I describe my vision of a classroom. It's this 3-legged stool, and on top is the classroom. It's the teacher with the students, and this perfect little, utopian classroom on top of the stool, if you will. And there's 3 legs to that stool. There's leading, there's serving, and teaching. And as I say, typically when I'm speaking to audiences and whatnot, I talk about this one, the stool, and describe it in depth. And I say, most teachers today, I feel like, are out there. They're trying to balance the stool on one leg. They're training in college, maybe their professional development happening at their school. Their experiences as an educator thus far maybe have all dealt with that teaching leg, the best techniques. It's the science of teaching. It's all this data and information they've been given. They're sitting there trying to balance on this one leg of this stool, and that's why they are so overwhelmed, discouraged, burned out. And my goal is to take them from that side of things to being focused, fulfilled, and fired up through the lead, serve, teach philosophy. So the first element that I go into, the first section of the leadership leg, is very simple, and that's the key element with this book too. If you'll see it, it's not this huge book. Sometimes in education we get the book that's like that thick given to us, and we're like, oh geez, I've got time to read this 500-page book right now. It's a very short, easy read. It is nothing too crazy. Each section of it very simple to understand. Starts off with a little introduction, basically establishing why this process is important. And then it goes into a little life lesson with Mr. Miller, how I figured this out, something that was important, maybe some mistakes that you all can learn from that I made as a teacher. And so I have a life lesson in each one, and then it goes into specific action steps after that, why it's important for you, and the call to action, what needs to be done with this and how you can implement this tomorrow in your classroom, what you can do. So the very first leg is called pick the best and forget the rest. It's and this, as you can imagine, this is going out to all the teachers that are overwhelmed. Let's be honest. We as educators have 10,000 things happening in any given class period. And we've got to teach at the highest level. We've got to use those best techniques and strategies. And we've got students with different learning abilities in our classroom. We've got students with 504s, maybe ESE students that have individual education plans. We have to meet those, and then maybe there's small group learning that's taking place in the classroom. And also we're wanting to be more collaborative in our learning processes. We've got to make sure all this stuff is happening. There's got to be the gradual release method going on there, and so there's so much that goes into it, so much that goes into the lesson planning. And that's just what's happening like in the classroom in the moment. You add in all the paperwork that comes in, the extra meetings that you have to go through, and it becomes very overwhelming very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so the very first, right out of the gate thing I'm giving to the teachers and to educators out there is how to pick the best and forget the rest. It is a process, simple process, something I learned, again, as a leader, something I didn't learn until I'd already had many years in the education field and decided, I'm going to go get my master's degree in educational leadership and learn some techniques, because as an educational leader, it's no different. You're inundated with things that have to happen, angry parents calling, you got data that's coming in all the time, and you got to be able to balance all this stuff. And if you don't have a process, a simple process for how to take everything that's thrown at you during a school day and be able to compartmentalize those things that are being thrown at you, that information, the events, the phone call, whatever it is, you've got to be able to put them on a matrix, if you will, or what I call quadrants. I was introduced to the Eisenhower matrix, the quadrant. Stephen Covey talks about it in his books as well. And it kind of goes into just developing a to-do list. A lot of teachers I found have to-do lists. They'll write down a to-do list that is an absolute mile long. And one of the best statements I ever heard from a fellow teacher, they said, I have a to-do list for my to-do list.
Yes.
And it was like, it resonated all these years later. I still remember it because it resonated. And I was like, man, that is overwhelming to have a to-do list for your to-do list. And I realized, again, that realization that I had as a principal of a massive virtual school during COVID, and realizing, wow, my priorities were mixed up, which is pretty crazy to say. My priorities were off base. Yeah, I was making sure the conveyor belt was moving, that we were staying afloat, but I was missing the opportunity to inspire my students, to work with my students, and really to inspire my teachers, work with my teachers. And I said, man, why don't I go back and use that tool that I was given as an educational leader and start putting things into quadrant 1, quadrant 2, 3, and 4. And it's other people call it the important urgent matrix.
Yes.
And so quadrant 1, for example, is simply, it's urgent, and it's time sensitive, but it's also extraordinarily important.
Yeah.
So those things need to come first.
Yes.
And then there are things that are maybe urgent, but they're not that important. Or maybe they're really important, but they're not that urgent. Or maybe they're not important and not urgent. Like watching your favorite TV show. Maybe it's not urgent, not important. Maybe it needs to go to quadrant 4. You could do it later, or maybe, as I talk about in my book, maybe those things in quadrant 4, you need to take a look and see, I really even need to do them. Are they important? Not important. They're not urgent. Drop them off. So very simply doing that. But so many teachers tend to not do that. They they tend to look at a to-do list. And it takes about 3-4 minutes, let's say, to produce a to-do list every morning. You can take and add maybe another 2 or 3 minutes to that, and simply take your to-do list that you make every morning and drop it into that matrix. Just draw 4 squares on a sheet of paper right next to your to-do list, and it can be that simple. A couple of minutes can help you determine
a lot.
Is it important? Is it not? And it sounds so simple, and yet I've found most teachers tend not to do that. A lot of teachers have that to-do list. Most of them don't put it into that quadrant in order to help them make decisions. But you know what? That's a leadership move, and we need to. And again, this is big picture stuff. We need to develop our teachers as leaders. That's what they are. We need to stop saying, "Oh, well, educational leadership is for principals and for administrators."
Yeah, no, it's for everyone. It's
for everyone. Why are we not? We need to train our teachers as leaders right from the get-go, right from the start.
Yeah.
So and with that, we need to take it and move it over into that servant leadership mentality.
Absolutely.
I did so much research going through this time of trying to find myself again as an educator. And I said one of the things I wanted to do was get outside of the education world and say what works. Again, going back, I was the unconscious competent in the classroom. Now I'm coming to the consciousness of saying, oh, okay, like it's really important to ask that question of what is working, what's not working. And so I went out and started looking at so many different areas in the business world, for example, of what worked there. What did the leaders that were the most successful, what did they do in their industry that made them be successful? And I found over and over and over again, the most successful leaders in the business world were those that had a servant mindset. They served their employees, they served their people, their clients. Hollywood presents leaders as I always go back to the 1980s movies. I'm thinking Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. They were always presented as this, mean spirited, greedy, just all about the numbers, ruled with an iron fist. And that's how Hollywood presented leadership to us. And you really go and start doing the research and find out, no, it has nothing to do with that. In fact, those are the leaders that failed. And so I really stepped back and said, wow, okay, as a leader, as a principal, I want to do this for my teachers. I want to show them that I'm going to go above and beyond and serve their best interest. I want to do that for my students, for my parents. And it really changed my mindset. And then I said, wait, if all teachers are leaders, then all teachers need to be servants.
That's right.
And then the epiphany happened that, when leaders establish themselves as leaders and then they take on that servant mindset, the relationship develops automatically. People are willing to follow those individuals. And when I say people in this case, the students are willing to follow the teachers. I hear it so often that the brand new teachers come in and they've been taught all these best techniques. They're balancing on that one leg of their stool, the teaching leg. They're totally missing the lead and serve leg of their teaching stool. They jump right into the classroom. They're throwing the best techniques and the best learning strategies at their students. And they come to the principals and they say, wow, these kids, why don't they like me? They don't want to listen to me. They don't want to learn from me. And I sit back and go, oh no, they missed establishing themselves as a leader and as more importantly, as a servant leader to students. They didn't develop that foundation. And when that relationship foundation is not there, learning, teaching won't take place. And so it's so extraordinarily important. So that's why I took that. I
absolutely love that. I think that's it. I mean, you brought out something so simplistic that is sometimes the most overlooked and can literally shift a whole life. I was going to say like a school year, but a life. Like it can change for, either the better or not. And we are modeling for our students. And so we've got to model what true leadership is. And that is servant leadership. I appreciate you calling that out. It's so good. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, a good example too is, with simply taking, that first principle, if you will, of the leadership section of my book, and then taking that first servant principle of my book, and then at the end, when it comes to that teaching leg, I take that first principle there of leadership, the first principle of servant, and then I put it into the teaching realm, what this looks like in your classroom, and take it forward to this call to action. And so the call to action for that first teaching leg is actually putting into practice the forget the pick the best, forget the rest.
I love that.
That need for servant leadership, and then putting it into practice. And the call to action for this section is specifically related to life lessons, developing yourself as this leader in the classroom, someone who's going to serve the students. And so specifically, I'm just going to read from my book for just a moment in this call to action. It says, what is one story from your life that you can share with your students? Write down a synopsis of the story below and answer the following questions. What elements of this story will allow your students to see you as a real, fallible person? What will make your students learn from the story? And how will this story make your students feel important? How will it empower them? And what quote, saying, or adage can you use to help summarize the learning moment? And so it's taking that ability to say, okay, I've got to determine from my to-do list, what's the most important thing I need to do in the classroom today? And in that, they're going to say, after going through the first leg of this book with the leadership, they're going to say, okay, I need to establish myself as a leader in this. And then they need to say, okay, with that, I also know now the most effective form of leadership is servant leadership. How am I going to serve my students? And then here they've got to bring it into the classroom and take that action step of saying, all right, I'm going to start my class a little different. My bell ringer may look a little different today because it may not be academically focused. It may actually be on the realm of building relationship with the students before I jump into the academic side.
That's right.
I had a gentleman, Dr. Derek King, that I've worked with for many years, and he mentioned it from his experience in the classroom as well. And he said it this way. He said, we've got a 50-minute class period for him to teach reading. He taught intensive reading to level 1 and 2 readers in Florida. That's kind of the lower end of the reading scale for our high school students. And he taught this intensive reading class. And it was imperative, like these students in his class, their graduation was riding on them being able to improve their reading scores. So it was extraordinarily important. And yet every day, and I will say that he jumped into teaching and learned from me. He would come into my classroom and he learned from me. And he started implementing the same process in his classroom. He would take the first 5 to 10 minutes of class and do a little bit of life lesson with Dr. King. And he would implement a couple of those principles to establish himself as a leader and as a servant of those students. And he said it so perfectly. And he said, actually taking the 5 to 10 minutes of the class to that non-academic things happening here at the beginning of class was so worth it. He said the 40 minutes that remained in the class were so effective.
Absolutely.
So worth it. Rather than saying, no, I'm going to go bell to bell with instruction for 50 straight minutes and fight it the whole way. And he said it really wouldn't move the needle that much. But he said when he took 5 or 10 minutes to develop that relationship through a life lesson mentality, where he said, what's the most important thing the student needs to know today? How can I establish myself as a leader and a servant? How will this story serve their needs? How will it form relationship, etc.? When he asked those simple questions, putting together a leadership mindset with a servant mindset and saying, how can something as simple as telling a story, how can it have a massive impact on the classroom? And he said, man, I'd take 40 minutes of great instruction any day over 50 minutes.
Exactly.
Through it. And I said, that is beautiful.
It really, that's such a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that. I think that our listeners today can I take that with them. That's brilliant. And let me say this, that to me, guys, and some of you might have heard bell to bell instruction. You might like, oh, I know teachers who are like, oh my gosh, they want us to do bell, and they get stressed by it. But the way that you put it, and that way, you're taking these three things and you're really thinking about those intentionally. That allows the students. Well, first of all, you're starting off with community time. You're building community, and then you can move like 5 minutes of community and say, hey, okay, here's where we are. Here's a story, or do you have a story? Having a student voice. You know, we talked about this yesterday. You heard my story when I started off. Let's start your story today. And those are ways to get the students actively involved. But the beauty of the beauty of your simplicity in preparing for that instruction, I think, is a game changer. Y'all gotta take notes, because I'm telling you, he's dropping gems today. You need to take notes to sit there and say, what is the goal? There's a lot of goals. And so you shared such valuable information, and it connects right back to what you were speaking of earlier, when you were talking about like creating like life lessons and creating your stories and coming. I know it seems too good to be true, but it is simple. It can be that simple. It really can. And I love the example of your teacher that you shared. Can you all share some stuff in the chat, some takeaways from that? I really want to know how you'll go and utilize some of those strategies. Lead, serve, and you can even repeat. I know repetition is helpful. Repeat, like the 3 strategies he used. Started off, and I always call it community time or community building, setting the tone, whatever you want to call it, anticipatory set. Like that's important. And then you can go from the bell to bell and not feel like, oh gosh, I have all this stuff to do. No, you have a goal. Oh, this is what I was going to say. You picked, you said, I wrote it on here. I love it.
Pick the best, forget the rest.
All of this connects. When you have done that, that's something like, okay, this is really what's most important today. All right. I know that I need to maintain and build relationships. So how do I pick the best and connect it to the relationships in the being culturally responsive in the classroom? I'm doing that. Like, these are all things I love, I'm calling you Dr. Miller. I mean, you know, I love how you're teaching us the art of really overcoming. And then you're telling a story from your own or even from the students' lens, and you're able to go through that bell to bell instruction with servant leadership mindset. What a beautiful way to put that out. Thank you for sharing that.
And that's it. You know, I surveyed so many teachers in this process and trying to develop the lead, serve, teach philosophy, and so many of the teacher, one of the questions I would ask, I would say, you know, who was that teacher for you that made a difference? You know, who are the teachers that you remember? And so often it'd be just amazing to watch as they would say, well, it was so-and-so. And they would say, Miss so-and-so, Mr. So-and-so. They would know the person by name, and they would tell me all about how they formed a connection with them as a student, how they supported them, how they made a difference in their life. You know, the one thing that was left out that was always funny is, well, not left out all the time, but left out quite often was the academic subject that they taught. It didn't matter. Yeah. And you know, they've got 100 teachers to choose from, and they choose the one that, you know, I'm sure if I'd asked a little bit further, poked and prodded and said, hey, what did they teach actually? I'm sure they would have known right then and there, but in their story and the way that their brains are working, us as educators, we go back and look at, hey, who were those most influential teachers for us? Who were the ones that made a difference? And a lot of times we leave out the fact that, oh, they taught chemistry, or they taught U.S. history. You know, we leave that out because that wasn't the most important thing. That those teachers
most important thing. It was how they felt. It is how they, like, that atmosphere that was set. It was that day to day, like, I want to be back in this space. I don't care what you teach me. And I asked you about, have you encountered an educator that impacted your life? And I do want to talk about her. Let's go. You did talk about her a little bit, because I want you all to remember that educators are not just in your classroom. People, like I said before, everybody's educating somewhere. It's also family. It's also community. And so that's the segment that we're in this quarter. So talk to us a little bit about Miss Andrea.
Well, and I think this is the one that I put in there with Miss Andrea, as in my wife, Miss Andrea.
Yes. She's an educator. I don't think she is an educator, honey.
He is an educator, and she's what's funny is she's not in education proper.
Right.
She's always been on the business side of things,
Mm-hmm.
and she's always been either in the business world, running a business, director of operations,
Right.
working with larger corporations and different things. So, but her mentality has just really made a big impact on me as an educator. She's the one that has pushed me, and especially in that moment where I'm, was overwhelmed, burned out, sitting there going like, what is going on? Like, why I should be at the top of my game. What is happening? What is going on? And she was the one that simply said back, she's like, you need to step away for a moment. You need to do an audit on your life. You need to do a heavy look at what you're doing day to day, and is it really, are you fulfilling your purpose?
Mm.
It was a life change. It was a game changer, because I said, wow, I've been going for well over a year now of just churning, nose to the grind, and I'm not serving my purpose. And again, relating that back to the teachers, I realized I think there's so many teachers out there that are just working like absolute dogs out there.
It's the truth.
Spending so many hours just working so hard on this stuff, and then they're going home unfulfilled. They're going home going like, oh, what impact did I make? Because they're so, and I hate to say distracted, but that's really the key here. They're so distracted from their actual purpose and their calling in what they're doing as an educator. They get so distracted with this, again, the science of teaching, not a bad thing. They get distracted with the data that is just, we have so much data and it's so great and can help us so much. And yet you can spend many, many hours delving into that data, and get distracted by it. You can get distracted by the paperwork. I walked into a friend's classroom one time, and there's students in there, and they're all just working on a worksheet. And I look, and I see the teacher sitting at his desk working on worksheets. and I walked out. I said, what are you teaching now? What's going on? And it was, I say worksheet that he was working on. It was some ESE documentation, all the stuff, and it was stacks of paperwork that he was just trying to get through. And I'm looking at what's going on, and I'm not the biggest fan of worksheets and telling students, hey, go do this worksheet. And so I was looking at that, going, what's going on? And like, you got a group of students in here that want something from the teacher.
Yes, they do.
And unfortunately, and he was a great teacher. And man, when he taught, when he was in front of the students, he was dynamic.
Yeah.
Yet, I go in the room, he's inundated, he's distracted by paperwork that he felt like was so important that it would actually take him from the opportunity to actually teach and work and change lives right there that are in front of him. Absolutely. And I said, well, that's just a sad thing that the teachers get so distracted. They're not using that quadrant again. What's urgent, what's important. When the students are in front of us, they are the most urgent and most important thing.
They're number one. That's good. So
if we're not putting it through that lens, and again, that's the second leg of the leadership thing. I talk about using the lens that never fails. The lens that never fails is simply put. I put it in my book. It is simply do what's best for the students.
Yeah.
And realize that they are always in quadrant one.
I was just about to say they're always in quadrant one.
And so don't feel like, even though you have a district or a state department of education, or maybe you're reading some other book, and it makes it feel like this paperwork or this learning this technique or making sure the lesson plan is absolutely perfect. Those things need to move to another quadrant, to be honest, because if it's distracting, if it's taken away from actually being in front of your students and making a life-changing impact with them while that small amount of time you actually get with them, we're missing the point. And that's why we're going home unfulfilled. I'm sorry, paperwork doesn't fulfill anyone. Having the perfect lesson plan may make you feel good for a moment, but I'm not sure how much fulfillment you actually get from having that perfectly laid out lesson plan. Maybe going on. I have another friend, and he, again, outside of education, he's in the business world, but he says sometimes you just got to do it sloppy, and he's talking to other business leaders and business owners, and he's like, sometimes you can sit there and plan and plan and plan and plan till you're blue in the face.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you miss the best time to do things. You miss the opportunity that's in front of you because you're still sitting back in the planning phase. And that's got to be perfect before I go and actually do it.
Right.
Sometimes you just need to go and do it. It may be sloppy, it may be dirty, maybe not perfect. But I think a lot of teachers and educators suffer from perfectionism.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need to get out of our own way and get straight to what matters most. And that's the students right in front of you. How are you developing that relationship so that they are willing to learn from you?
Exactly.
And that's it brings me to another, I'll give you another gem right here. And some people get mad at me when I say this, but I still say it and I stand by it. If a kid doesn't like you, they won't learn from you. So what are you doing every day to make sure those kids are going to like you? And that's a tough statement. I've had a lot of teachers and educators disagree. It's not our job to be their friends. Our job, and I'm like, I'm not talking about being their best friend. I'm talking about establishing a relationship in which they find value in what you bring to the table every day. That's the key.
No, I like that because I feel like I have heard mixed reviews around it, like, oh, you don't have to, and I even heard parents say that you don't have to like your teacher, you got to do your work. But you know what? It makes it a lot better to be in an atmosphere. You actually can excel even further. Your students can excel even further if they're like, wow, if you are likable. And I think that also connects with like the business world. So you were talking about how you kind of fuse those together. People don't really want to buy from people they don't like all like that. Now they may, but you may not get the most out of them. You may not get them coming back over and over. Same thing with your students. How do you expect them to kind of be comfortable enough to come and ask questions, to be free, not to be perfect, to be free to make mistakes and fail forward if they don't feel that you have a genuine care, an authentic care for them.
Right. Well, that's again going back to my wife being this phenomenal teacher.
Yeah.
Even her experience in the sales world coming in, that very idea, she's having this epiphany, like, teachers are selling content all day, every day.
All day. That's what we do.
And it sounds so terrible. Again, as educators, we're like, oh no, we're not selling. We're
We're jumping on tables like, come on.
Yeah, we've got to sell our content. We've got to do what works. And that's the key element, like you said. People don't buy things from the people that they don't like, that they don't have a relationship with. It's in the sales way. That's what it's all about, is developing likability, developing relationship. And I think, again, in the education world, we need to start looking at other industries and say,
we really do. I agree.
It's one of those things that's work. We've got to make ourselves likable. We've got to focus on marketing and selling our content
and simplify stuff.
And simply say it's not rocket science to sell something. It's really not. You have to simply show the value in it. But if you don't have that relationship established, they're not going to see the value in it. So it's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward stuff.
That's true. And I think that, like, some people do struggle with that, and classroom management and all of that, and connecting different cultures are all throughout our school, through everybody. We all have different cultures, but then even those who've been historically marginalized, like sometimes people feel like, I can't deal with these kids. I can't get to them. They have all the great content. They're ready. But then it's like, wait a minute, you gotta find a way to connect. It's not that you need to, like you said, be their best friend. It's not that you need to like pretend and put on you just be honest and say, hey, I don't know. You teach me too. The students are teaching us as well about their cultures, about how they learn, and actually makes it a lot easier for us when we're planning.
And that's one of those key elements of that, whatever you want to call it, life lesson with Mr. Miller is what I called it. And I had a very unique childhood growing up in a foreign nation. Actually, my parents were missionaries in Malaysia, and so I have a very unique background and story. And so I was able to start sharing some of my background as a child, growing up in a foreign country, with students at an inner city school. Some of them have never left this county. before, but it opened the door for some of them to share the fact that they've never been outside of Lake County, Florida, and again, we are learning. Whenever I'm sitting there thinking about teaching a history lesson or something about a country that's on the other side of the world, I'm like, I need to establish some maybe backtrack a little bit to establish some level of foundational knowledge of this country. It's simple things like that come from their childhood, and I realized, wow, they haven't been outside this county, much less the state of Florida, much less this nation. And you go, oh, wow, it does impact the way you teach. It does impact the way you think, and we've got to take the time to do it. That old adage of sometimes you got to go a little bit slower to go faster.
Yeah, that's right.
Very true in the education world. Yeah, it's a great example.
Wow. Thank you. Oh my gosh, we have to have you back. We do. You have so much depth, and I love what you're sharing, and you just serve. And I know that those of you who are listening, you've gotten lots of jewels out of this. So thank you so much for listening in and tuning in. Go ahead and put your takeaways in the chat. Like, what did you get from this today? What were some of the strong points that you can also even use? And we're so excited to have you here today. And I just wanted to make sure you guys know how to get in contact and how to reach. And while I'm putting up your stuff, I want you to give us like a one word, like a one phrase or takeaways or something that can inspire us as we go, that's inspiring you. But guys, I'm going to put on the screen again the book. I want you to remember that the philosophy is very simple to remember, but it's very impactful. And the message that we heard today from I keep on wanting to say doctor, because you are just a doctor in this work, honey.
Well, I'm actually not a doctor. It's my first name is Donald Paul Miller. So
yes, I know.
Paul, that's where that comes from.
I feel like I'm learning from you as a professor in here. We're all learning, so I'm like, doctor, professor, keep teaching us.
you can just call me Paul. All right.
I love it. I love that you just have a heart to serve. And knowing that going into our, I'm going back here. Sorry. We're putting you on this wall of brilliance because we just continuously interview such amazing educators who are just like yourself, wanting to serve. And I love your message. And maybe you want to say that, but I want you all to know that this is a powerful message, and taking this away for this new school year will help you to have a brilliant school year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll leave you with this one thing and specifically, I know there's a lot of teachers that will be listening to this series, this podcast that you do. And so I just wanted to share encouragement. First of all, I'll just use the title of my book. Hey, teachers, don't quit. We see you. We know the struggles you're going through. And there are ways to simplify things and still be that effective teacher, even in this culture, even in this day and age where so much is changing around us. There are certain elements about what success is, what life-changing impact is that will never change. It will always be the same. So stay focused on those items, and please know how important you are. One of the greatest takeaways that I had from my experience during the time of COVID and all the craziness that happened, and I put it in my book called Hey, Teachers, Don't Quit. And I simply said that teachers may be the single greatest stabilizing asset that any community has when society is thrown into chaos. We saw that during COVID. We saw that portrayed in the media and in our small communities, big cities, everywhere. We saw that teachers, our education system was put under the spotlight. And there was a lot of good things that came out of it. There was a lot of those students' faces that we may have saw on the other end of a Zoom or a Google Classroom, Google Meets, but we could see that there was still this connection going on. There was still, in the midst of absolute chaos, people were looking at teachers. The parents were looking at teachers. Community members were looking for teachers, and the students, for sure, were looking for their teachers, begging to have that opportunity to learn from them, to commune with them, to be with them. And so don't ever doubt your value and importance. You may feel like you are overlooked so often. You may feel burned out and overwhelmed right now. Step back. First of all, realize your importance as a leader, as a servant, as a teacher, and start developing a new mindset about what your real purpose is, what your real calling is as an educator. I'll leave you there. Uh-oh, I think you may be on mute, Miss Robin.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I sure was. Go on. Tell us how we can reach you and where we can get our book again. And guys, we really need you to go. You really need to go to Amazon right now. Your students need you to go on right now. The teachers, everybody, we need you to go on Amazon right now. Go ahead and tell us where we can.
Absolutely. I would love for all of you to go out and get your own copy of Hey Teachers Don't Quit. It was an Amazon #1 bestseller in 8 different categories when it was released, and it is absolutely still there. If you go and search Hey Teachers Don't Quit, you won't miss it. It's the first one that'll pop up, and it is there. If you want to know more about myself and the services I provide, obviously I am a speaker, educator, author, and consultant, and so I do get out to schools, do trainings, I do keynotes, and do specific trainings, and even set up 9-week trainings, 9-week virtual trainings with schools where they take the 9 principles, the 3 on lead, 3 on serve, 3 on teach, and implement those. And I stay in contact with those schools as they implement this as part of really changing their school community. And so if you want more information about me and the services I provide, you can go to dpaulmillerspeaks.com, and you'll find out a lot of information about books I've written, books I've been included in, as well as the different topics upon which I speak, and how I work, again, through keynotes, trainings, professional developments. And would love to come to a school near you or your school and provide more information, more training, and more development, helping those teachers directly develop their new mindset as a leader, servant, and teacher.
Yes. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. We want to say again, hey, teachers, don't quit. Supposed to do that with me. Ready? Hey, yeah. Teachers, don't quit. I didn't tell you, but I'm glad I threw you right in there. Don't quit. And guess what? Find out how you don't have to quit this year at all. Go ahead and get his book. Go to his website. You see it's right on the screen. He just told you it as well. I wanted to make sure that you all know that we are having some other things coming up as well. And we want you to be a part of our summit. Hopefully we can get a great voice coming to support us as well here. Our summit is coming up in August 31st, the 1st, and we want to make sure that you're creating those winning classrooms. And then next week, we have another brilliant guest on, but we are so excited, and we just want to say thank you to you. You have been awesome. You have given us some jewels that we will not forget. I will make sure they do not forget that. Guys, go right now. Go to Amazon right now and get that book. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We appreciate you. Say bye to everybody. Paul.
Thank you, Miss Robin. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. And just thank you for all that you do, Ms. Robin. Thank you for all the teachers out there. Thank you for all that you do as well. You are seen and you are appreciated.
Thank you. Wonderful. Guys, we'll see you next week. Bye.